convene the Campus Planning Buildings and Grounds Committee.
Thank you, Chair Day. Will the Committee on Campus Planning, Buildings and Grounds please come to order? There is one request for public comment. Mr. Jacobian, if you would come to the mic. And in your prior presentations, I had a little bit of trouble hearing you. That's my problem, not yours. But if you would try to speak up just a little bit, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a short one. I have a question for the trustees. So when the funding is allocated to the campuses to take on a project, is there how does the planning happen, and what are the auditing processes and ensuring the projects are done properly? Because or they're planned properly. The reason I'm asking this question is 3 years ago, there was a $1.5 million funding that was used to pave a large parking lot, and that reduced the parking by 15%. And now this year, the same parking lot is being teared down to build a parking structure, while there are parking areas on the other side of the campus. I mean, there needs to be some kind of a sense of responsibility for public funds, and it seems like, when these projects get funded, the CSU does not look at where these are being built and how much funding was spent to build the prior structure there and how long ago. So, I would appreciate a comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment and your question. It is now time for the committee to consider today's consent agenda, which consists only of the July committee minutes. Does any committee member wish to remove this item for further discussion? Hearing no request, are there any objections to the approval of the consent agenda? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. All right, we have two items on today's discussion agenda. Item 2 is an action item. We are going to request approval of the San Jose State University Interdisciplinary Science Building. The item will be presented by Steve Verlier, President Mary Papazian, and Vice Ann Juan. Steve, you'll be beginning. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair Eisen. This item requests that the Board of Trustees approve the schematic plans for the Interdisciplinary Science Building at San Jose State University. Previously, the Board approved this project's preliminary plans at its November 2015 meeting and its construction and financing plan at the November 2016 meeting. President Mary Papazian will next comment on the importance of this project for San Jose State and for improving student success on that campus. President Papazian.
Thank you, Executive Vice Chancellor Aurelia, for introducing San Jose State University's Interdisciplinary Science Building Project. And good afternoon, board members of the Board of Trustees. Today we are here to approve the design of the first academic building in 30 years for San Jose State, a much-needed science facility that will enhance interdisciplinary STEM education and provide more opportunities to collaborate with our industry partners. This new facility is sorely needed. Our current science building houses laboratory classrooms built in the 1950s, nearly 70 years ago. So as we design this new space, we look to create a modern, innovative building that is forward-looking to the future of our students, of education, and of Silicon Valley. The design of the new interdisciplinary science building incorporates our own campus strategic goals, as well as CSU-wide initiatives to provide academic excellence and leadership, while also educating for engagement and innovation. We are excited to imagine a building where each floor has a mentoring hub for students to work on interdisciplinary projects, connect with faculty, and meet with industry partners. A space that turns the hallways between classrooms and research labs into a collaborative core that allows student and faculty researchers to brainstorm and plan out their projects, as well as a high-performance computing suite for astronomers, physicists, social scientists, health professionals, and more. where students and faculty from different disciplines can share their work and improve their research techniques. This new interdisciplinary science building will provide essential space for our more than 3,000 STEM students to collaborate and will enhance our growing partnerships with industry leaders in Silicon Valley. Thank you for your review of the design, and we look forward to moving into the construction phase of this project. Now I will turn it over to Assistant Vice Chancellor Vi San Juan to present the item. Vi.
Thank you, President Papazian. Good afternoon, members of the board. This is the physical master plan for San Jose State University. As you can see, there are limited sites to locate this new science facility. The proposed site is shown in red and is planned to be next to the West Parking Facility and just north of Duncan Hall, which is one of the existing science facilities on campus. The site is currently used as a surface parking lot and for the Associated Students House, and the house will be relocated to the northeast side of campus, which is circled in blue. It'll be in closer proximity to the student union. The Associated Students are supportive of the new site for the house and has worked with the administration on the orientation of the relocated building to ensure that outdoor activities can still occur with the student groups. This is the rendered view of the interdisciplinary science building. The project will construct 8 stories to house teaching and research laboratories, associated laboratory support space, faculty offices, and collaborative space for the College of Science. The building is intended to be a beacon for the campus and community, and with the use of glazing to create transparency and architectural sun shading features to reduce heat gain. A cafe will be provided on the ground floor. The total project cost is $181 million and will be funded with system-wide revenue bonds, designated campus reserves, and continuing ed reserves, and staff recommends approval. Chair Eisen, that concludes our presentation. We'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Comments or questions regarding this proposed new facility?
Quick question.
Yes, Trustee Taylor.
If we approved it in 2015, 2016, why is it before us a third time?
You've approved the project and the potential financing, but you had not approved schematic design.
Okay.
And it's over $40 million.
Do we approve every project 3 times?
Yes, sometimes more if it's a public-private partnership.
So, Trustee Taylor.
Wow.
But usually the approval of the project, as you can see on the first page of the agenda item, it says it's part of the capital outlay program for 16-17 and 17-18. So for most academic projects, that's included in what will be in the next item. So it's part of the 5-year plan. So that's one item that would cover most of the campus projects.
Okay. Just seems like a lot of steps. That's all, Vi. And our goal is to get these things done, particularly if they haven't had a new academic building in 30 years, which flabbergasts me at some level. Trying to move these things more quickly is always a goal. Thank you.
Trustee Taylor, I've had a similar frustration trying to remember which time, haven't I seen this project before? So I've asked, and I think we're going to have a chart that will give us the various projects that are in the works and that require board approval at various stages, and which stage we're now at and which stage we've already approved. So in a one page, we can see that and know where we are.
That's terrific. Thank you.
Further comments or questions?
Move it.
All right. I have a motion. Is there Steve, did you want to add something?
Just a quick comment. One thing that has reduced the number of times we've come to the board for projects, capital projects at various stages, has been raising the threshold where the board has approved it. And the most recent raise, thanks to a proposal from Trustee Nylon, was to raise it to $40 million as the cutoff point. So you're actually not seeing a number of projects that are that smaller group. Of course, this is a very big, important project. Mm-hmm. One thing we have not proposed to the board is whether or not to consolidate the phasing, because as Trustee Taylor pointed out, this is now the third time on a single project, because we typically will do the original plan, the financing as a separate item with the finance committee, and then when we get to schematic design, bring that back again. If at some point the board wants to have a different threshold, say for schematic design, that's up to the board to make that determination.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? Oh, you had further comment?
I understand that it takes time, but for me, it takes so long to visit all the campuses. So in a way, it's helpful for me to see, that building's going to be started soon and what it looks like. And so I sort of enjoy and find it helpful actually to see what stage we're at and even what the buildings are.
Yep. Any further discussion? Jack, you look anticipatory. Yeah.
Yes, I'm just trying
Okay.
to find my button. This project is bumping up to $900 a square foot, and I hope that we have a pretty rigorous value engineering process in place because these are getting to be pretty expensive buildings.
That's very true. And in the Bay Area, the costs are really have been skyrocketing with the amount of construction. So we recognize those costs, but we've had very little ability or success in bringing the costs back down. It was just not long ago, we were at 600 for a science building. So I'm with you there.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The item is approved. Item 3 is an information item presenting the preliminary 5-year capital plan. At my request, the 5-year capital plan was distributed in the packet only to committee members. Everybody else can access it online. I have stopped referring to the phone book and started referring to the 5-year capital plan when I want to talk about a big tome of paper. So I appreciate the staff doing that for us. So the item will be presented by Steve Relier and Vi San Juan. Steve, will you begin again?
Thank you, Chair Eisen, and a number of comments made on this last item is a good setup for, I think, us talking about the 5-year capital plan and what's occurred overall with the buildings in the last few years. So this item does provide information to the Board of Trustees on the development of the university's 5-year capital plan with the year ending 2023-24. This preliminary plan develops the framework for the future of CSU's built environment, ensuring that our facilities help provide for the best possible outcomes for students, faculty, and staff in support of our academic mission. Each year, we update this plan to identify campus capital priorities and funding needs. The plan is provided to the legislature and used to support our use of CSU funding for capital and to justify additional funding from the state of California. The final plan will be returned to the board in November for action. So today is an information and overview item, and then in November for action. As noted in the board item, the funds from the multi-year capital financing plan approved by the board in November of 2016 have been allocated to projects that have received past board approval. We anticipate that $250 million is remaining to fund and/or finance projects, and that the majority of the campus project request presented in this preliminary plan will require additional funding. At the suggestion of Committee Chair Eisen, the presentation also includes an overview of capital funding since 2014, which is the year that the legislature transferred responsibility for capital financing to the CSU for academic projects. This authority allowed the CSU to invest in creating appropriate learning spaces and replacing many of our failing utility systems. These investments will help the CSU and its campuses reach the ambitious targets set in Graduation Initiative 2025, enabling opportunities for academic achievement, graduation, and lifelong success for our students. As a reminder, this is an information item to share our progress addressing our capital priorities over the last few years, our progress on the 5-year plan development, and to solicit the Board of Trustees' input. We will return to you at the November board meeting for approval of the final plan and potential approval to finance a small portion of that plan to fund our most highest priority projects. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Assistant Vice Chancellor Vi San Juan to go through the presentation. Vi.
Thank you, Steve. During today's presentation, we will talk about what we have accomplished since 2014. Some of the projects are in design and construction, and some have been completed. We'll identify what remains to be done and then the next steps for the 5-year plan development. The next slide shows what we have accomplished. As Steve mentioned, in 2014, the legislature transferred authority to the CSU to issue debt financing to fund academic projects and authorize the use of operating funds for capital improvements. So this was a tremendous change for the CSU. It allowed the CSU to invest over $1.4 billion since 2014 to repair, renovate, and build academic facilities. Of the $1.4 billion that will be spent, the bulk has been approved to improve existing facilities, including replacement of existing facilities. The blue section at the top of the chart represents a limited amount of $75 million spent on growth projects to increase student access to the CSU by constructing new lecture laboratory space. And those have primarily gone to small campuses, Channel Islands, Monterey Bay. The highest amount, shown in red, represents the $504 million that has been funded to reduce the risk of critical infrastructure failures. So if you recall or may not recall, that was the board's highest priority in 2014. We only spent the limited capital we received on infrastructure. The green section is for the renovation or renewal of non-STEM facilities, for example, replacing a creative arts facility. And the purple segment represents the almost $400 million investment in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, building renovations or replacements. These buildings tend to be costly and difficult to renovate for continued science use due to changes in the building code. As a result, we are building a number of replacement STEM facilities and then converting the existing facility to another use, such as dry labs, classrooms, faculty, or administrative office space, depending on the campus needs. To improve our facility's ability to withstand seismic events, we are investing over $362 million, as shown in turquoise. The slide demonstrates investments consistent with the board's priorities of the categories and criteria that you approve annually, with a focus on our infrastructure, on safety of our existing buildings, and trying to balance those needs against providing access to and improve the quality and quantity of learning space. In addition to the 1.4 committed to improve academic projects like classrooms, the CSU has funded about $1.8 billion in self-support projects to provide student housing, student unions, continuing education classrooms, and parking, for example. The next 5 slides provide a sense of the type of facilities that have been funded across the system to improve our teaching and learning spaces. So we'll start first with seismic upgrades. Starting clockwise from the upper left is the Los Angeles Physical Sciences Building. We've already built the replacement facilities for science at Los Angeles, and this building, which has been largely sitting vacant, will be converted to administrative use. This will allow the occupants of the true administration building on campus to be, the occupants will be relocated from the administration building into the renovated physical sciences building because the administration building is on our seismic list and a high priority. And it's a high-rise structure, so it needs to be taken care of. So that will be really tremendous when we're able to move on to the next phase. But the initial phase is physical science. Moving in a clockwise direction is the Long Beach Peterson Hall 2 project. This revitalizes an existing 1950s-era science and classroom building to provide a student learning success center offering consolidated student services ranging from financial and academic advising to disability services. So it'll really help with student success at Long Beach State. Next is Humboldt State, the University Theater Arts Building seismic. Not a glamorous project, but it will upgrade the connections of the long span structure and certainly help when you have high loads for lighting and sets in that facility. Then the East Bay Library Replacement Building, supporting student success by responding to new trends in university education and learning. It houses space for self-directed learning and work collaboration rooms and makerspace to promote innovation. We have funded 15 seismic upgrade projects in the last 5 years to improve student, faculty, and staff safety in our facilities and continue to make progress on our seismic hazards. Next on the STEM facilities, starting clockwise, again from the upper left, Sacramento Science 2. It will be the capstone of Sac State's goal of building a regional resource center for education in STEM. The building has been on the priority list since 2009, just when the crisis hit, so it was stalled from getting funding. Next is the Chico Cisco 2 science replacement, which will replace the facility that also has structural deficiencies and significant building system renewal needs, and it'll provide teaching in collaborative space. In the lower corner, Dominguez Hills Center for Science will improve the quality of student learning in biology, chemistry, and the physics departments. And last, the San Diego State Engineering and Interdisciplinary Science Building, which was completed in 2017. The project provides research and lab space that encourages cross-disciplinary student engagement. These buildings and the San Jose Science Building viewed earlier will improve our learning environments by providing technologically advanced spaces and collaborative space to support student learning in preparation of the global workforce. In addition to academic facilities, there are a number of self-funded facilities being built on campuses. First, the Northridge Sustainability Center. Completed in 2017, this net zero energy building provides office space for associated students, recycling and resource recovery offices, and the university's Institute for Sustainability. Next is the recently opened San Bernardino Student Housing and Dining Project, a 400-bed facility that houses both honors and first-year living learning community, followed by the Stanislaus Student Union. It will enhance space dedicated to students that includes a multi-purpose assembly space, new food services, and student government and leadership offices. And last, the San Luis Obispo Vista Grande Dining Center, which will provide a modern dining experience and needed to serve the increased number of students that will be living on campus. As campuses have increased bed capacity, they need additional space for dining and recreation to improve the student life on campus. Public-private partnerships is part of our capital plan, given our limited capital funding. This slide shows the partnership projects that were approved by the board have moved past the concept stage and towards development. Starting clockwise, the Long Beach Renewable Energy Generation 4.5 megawatt solar panel installation is operational. It's shown to the left of the pyramid. Next is the San Francisco State Holloway Student Housing and Mixed-Use Development that will replace single-story housing with a multi-story facility served by retail on the ground floor. It will be the initial phase of transforming the Holloway to a campus main street. Next is the San Marcos Extended Learning and Parking Project, also a mixed-use development with retail on the ground floor, extended ed classrooms, and offices on the upper floors. And last is the Cal State LA Football Club practice facility. The campus will receive ground lease revenues, updates to certain campus facilities, and the development of an underused site. The final slide highlighting campus improvements are donor-funded or co-funded projects that support the academic program. On the upper left is the Pomona Rose Float facility that's always a special collaboration between our two Cal Polys. Sonoma, the Wine Spectator Learning Center to address industry workforce needs. The Los Angeles Rongsheng Shu Bioscience Innovation Center to support the growing LA Bioscience Corridor. And finally, the San Luis Obispo Science and Ag Teaching and Research Complex, still in concept design, so it will come back to the board for schematic design, so you will see that again. But it has tremendous donor support and may be the highest amount for the system. So as you can see, we have accomplished a great deal in the last 4 years, and work continues. The CSU has used the increased financing authority in a responsible manner to support the mission of the university. Now turn to the question of what needs to be done. One of the key drivers influencing the campus capital outlay needs is the aging and condition of our academic facilities. The CSU has over 87 million gross square feet of space. Of that amount, over half comprises instructional buildings and facilities to support the academic program. The amount of space for self-support functions is about 43 million and approaching 50% of the total space. So really have increased the amount of self-support space in the last number of years. On the whole, the academic facilities are older than the self-support facilities, with 3 of every 5 academic facilities 40 years old or older, versus only 1 in 5 of the self-support facilities being 40 years old or older. The estimated cost to replace academic buildings that have passed their useful life was 2 billion. So that's the prior renewal number, building systems. Since 2002, we've been using a life cycle renewal model. So it was a more simplified manner of estimating the renewal needs for our buildings. And this last year, as part of our plan, how do we address that need? Part of the campuses wanted us to improve the methodology. So we hired consultants, we issued a master enabling agreement to get better pricing so that we had assessments done at each of the campuses. I think there's only 2 campuses that are still using the more simplified life cycle model. And the life cycle model at the time was selected because it was inexpensive. The campuses and headquarters decided, let's use the cheaper version and focus the money on the projects instead of putting too much money into a study when we didn't have enough money to complete all the projects. So part of the reason was to improve methodology on moving to a site visit by the consultants and also adding some life safety estimates for fire life safety that wasn't in the previous model and some asbestos abatement. So combination of changes in the assessment methodology and some additional programmatic factors that were not in the previous. But on the whole, in moving from the 2 billion to the 3.7, the greatest area of the increase is in HVAC. So that area has grown significantly. And in looking at the numbers overall, if we think of 44 million square feet and $2 billion, that was about $46 a square foot. And the increase has gone to about $70. So if we're now funding renovations about 400, that number could actually be a bit low. So we'll continue to look at the cost that's included in the renewal need as compared to what we're having to fund for actual construction. So study versus actual costs. So that'll continue to be a work in process. We've also started to improve the renewal backlog, the assessment for self-support facilities. Even though that they're younger, we did want to take a look at those numbers. We've estimated through a partial study, so most of the housing stock has been assessed, but not all of the, say, student unions and other facilities parking has been assessed on campus. So the backlog is estimated at $900 million. For both the academic facilities and self-support facilities, we encourage campuses to expend operating funds to avoid deferring maintenance and build reserves in order to afford replacing systems that are significant in cost. So part of the other plan outside of improving our methodology is trying to encourage campuses' own co-funding of projects. In addition to age and quality of our facilities, enrollment is another key driver of our facilities needs. Do our campuses have adequate lecture and lab seats to serve growing enrollment? Can we reconfigure library space to provide more room for student collaboration and reduce space dedicated to book stacks? Do we have enough faculty offices as we hire more faculty for the graduation initiative? We compare projected enrollment to our space and facilities database. So we have a database of all the space on the campuses, primarily academic. Our information on self-support is not as good. Such reports we use to we compare enrollment to the space database to assess need on a per discipline basis. So how much space do they need for computer science, bioscience, fine arts? Such reports are on our website and are used to recommend the priority list of projects to the board for consideration. So if one campus has worse space as far as a facility condition report, if they are shorter in lecture or lab space compared to another campus that's looking for capacity space, those are factors that play into the priority list that is attachment A of today's item. Now, moving to the development of the 5-year plan, a copy of the preliminary plan can be viewed via the link. Campus needs exceed $16 billion, which is comprised of $10 billion in academic projects and $6 billion in self-support projects. Of the $16 billion in attachment A, the priority list for 1920, so the first year of the 5-year plan, totals $1.8 billion, comprised of $1.7 billion for academic projects and just about $110 million for self-support. So more self-support projects will come forward during the year as they get their financial information together, and those that are under $40 million you will not see. So that's a change that will be beneficial for the board. There are tremendous needs in the CSU, and these are tremendous numbers. We know we cannot fund everything soon. We can, however, plan and prioritize and look for opportunities to secure additional funds to improve building safety and improve the student learning environment. In the next few weeks, we'll continue to work with campuses to refine the proposed budget, scope, and schedule of the projects. Both academic and self-support projects in the 5-year plan are still under review, and we're working with campuses in an iterative process to improve the projects, looking at their project costs. In addition, the Financing and Treasury Department will review proposed financing of projects prior to the November board. We review funding sources and the projected debt service to show the room we have for funding additional capital. This is an information item as we work to complete review of the proposed campus projects, and we will return in November with an updated academic project priority list for consideration. Just for the sake of numbers, Trustee Sebelius proposed $1 billion. So in my numbers, that would be roughly a $67 million base budget reoccurring funding that would be needed to fund $1 billion. If it were $3 billion, it would be about $200 million if we were to fund $3 billion in projects. So I'll turn it over to Steve to conclude the presentation.
Thank you, Vi. With the board's support, we've continued to work to make improvements to all campuses through the renovation of aging buildings, the replacement of aging infrastructure, and the addition of new state-of-the-art education spaces. Through the development of the capital outlay plan, we continue to work with campuses to prioritize and respond to the most critical system-wide needs. With insufficient state funding to support our capital plan, we continue to look for opportunities to be good stewards of CSU's resources while still meeting our mission to maintain and improve our campus assets. To that end, we look to campuses to provide a portion of project funding when they're able, and we are pursuing alternate means of project funding through actively pursuing public-private partnerships and donor funds whenever it's feasible. However, these measures will not be sufficient to address the $10 billion in funding needed to support the academic program as identified in this preliminary plan. As a result, we will consider the capital financing needs and return to the board in November with our recommendations. Committee Chair Eisen, that completes our information item, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Steve, and thank you, Vi. I think that was really one of the better, maybe the best 5-year capital plan information items we've had. It really was very helpful to see a visual of all that we're accomplishing and all that we need to accomplish. Any comments or questions regarding this information item? We do not have to vote on anything today. Chair Day.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for working with the staff on this revised presentation. A couple of quick comments. One, so Vi, it looks like we've spent roughly $5 billion over 3 years. So that's a great CSU stimulus package right there. So something to be proud of. It's not just building for building's sake, but we're making a big difference. Second comment, I was chatting with Vice Chair Campbell. So, 20 is the new 40. It looks like 40 is the new 60, or vice versa. So I'd love, if you happen to have handy, not right now, but a list of all of the buildings on campuses that are 60 years plus. And then maybe quantify what, at a very high level, what's housed there. It's one thing if it's just a shack. It's another if it's lab space. Just to kind of get a generic snapshot. My really only question is just when you mentioned criteria driven by enrollment. I'm concerned, much like we do with seismic needs, we kind of bump them up on the list through this criteria-based program. I'm wondering though if you're giving too much weight to pure enrollment, because when you look at certain classes, and I'll take Bio 101 as an example, if you only have 1,000 students in that major, but you're requiring every student on campus to take Bio 101, how are we making sure that those types of facilities are given the preference to ensure that they're up to date and or not out of date, so that it's clearly, I think you see what I'm trying to say, it clearly has a higher priority need for far more reach of and impact on far more students than just how many students are in that major.
If it's an existing building, then we look at building condition and see if campuses are able to use the infrastructure funding because then we can spread the money around to each campus. As much as we've been funding infrastructure, so replacing building systems, we've also funded some classroom renovations. So we can target certain floors, say, of a building, and that way spread the dollars. So it is a combination depending on the campus needs.
Further,
But I'm sorry, Vi, I think the question the chairman asked was sort of in the sense of gateway classes, gateway facilities. That are there facilities that have high use that students need regardless of their major? So in the going through the undergraduate general education requirements, that those get that aspect of that particular facility. Let's say a lecture hall for, I'm going to make up a number here, 250 or 500, is treated differently than a facility just for that major, which may have far fewer students. So I think he was referring to the issue of the gateway nature of certain learning spaces, gateway writ large for the campus and the migration of students' progress to degree.
I would say where we've heard that the most across the system are science education classes that are GE classes. So even though we're improving the research space by replacing science facilities, we're also improving the undergrad GE spaces for students that have to take science. So a gateway course. And I was saying classrooms because the interdisciplinary classrooms are where a lot of the kids come through regardless of what discipline they're taking. So that's where campuses and some of the ask has been to increase the size of the classroom so they can increase some of the courses, some of the access for students in those courses and do a better job with workload. So we've been installing larger classrooms over time to help with some of that throughput of some of the lower GE classes.
Well, I think you've captured it. As long as you're aware of it and the campus's capital facility planners are cognizant of it. I'm thinking of, also not just class space, but lab space. Could also not just be wet labs, but dry labs too. So I just want to raise it as an issue.
Trustee Taylor.
I didn't understand on page 1 on attachment A, you list the academic projects priority list. 2 of these items are in red because they've received DOF, is that Department of Finance approval?
That's right. What we were trying this year is differentiating projects that finance has previously approved. So we won't be submitting those projects up to finance since they've been approved in a previous letter from finance, and those that haven't. So with the increased authority, we're trying to streamline process with Department of Finance, and it also shows which ones have been approved by the board. So this is new for us this year, and trying to see what room we have to increase flexibility.
Might be useful for the members to understand, where does the department fit in the approval process? Where do they weigh in vis-a-vis where do we weigh in?
Sure, thank you. In the education code, we're required to submit our preliminary plan to Department of Finance. So September 1st, the projects that are on this list, their write-up, their narrative, their cost estimate went to Department of Finance. And then after the board approves the program in November, then we'll resubmit the final capital outlay budget change proposals, the write-ups on those projects, to the Department of Finance again. So I think due December 1st. They will review the projects, they'll share them, we share them with the legislature, the legislative analyst, and then the analysts will make comments usually in their January budget analysis and make comments, and then if it's an issue, there's finance will come out with a preliminary approval letter, I'm going to say in February, March, and they'll come out with a final approval letter, I'm going to say April. So they've got a couple months to notify the legislature of what their approval is on our projects, give the legislature a chance to weigh in, and then we get a final letter.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any further comments or questions? Before we leave the committee, I do want to ask President Nelson, whom I've not given a heads up to, but it's fun surprising a president, to please report, if you can, to me, to our committee, what you told me about one of our self-sustaining projects, your parking lot on Sacramento State's campus.
the new parking garage 5, just won a national honor as the most sustainable new building in the United States last year. Because of the construction, it was fully constructed off campus and then reassembled on campus by a group called Clark Pacific, who are graduates of Sac State. They also built the Apple building.
The most sustainable new building in the United States.
Sustainably built new building in the United States.
I like having my grammar corrected.
Well, if that was correct, then there'd be no fossil fuel cars they could park in it, right? I mean,
All right, with that, Chair Day, that concludes the business of the Committee on Campus Planning, Buildings and Grounds.
Thank you, Chair Eisen. Vice Chair Morales?